More than one Imperial agent has been found dead while researching such subjects. This single line from fragmented Imperial records tells you everything you need to know about the Minotaurs chapter. They are Space Marines shrouded in mystery, wrapped in contradiction, and sealed behind edicts that even the Inquisition cannot easily circumvent. They're the Emperor's bronze-clad executioners, appearing without warning to crush rebellions, destroy renegade Astartes, and prosecute the bloodiest campaigns of the Imperium with a savage efficiency that makes even other Space Marines wary. But who are the Minotaurs? Are they the same chapter created during the cursed 21st founding, or something else entirely? Why do they possess equipment and resources that would make first founding chapters envious? And why do they answer only to the High Lords of Terra, deploying with relish against their fellow Space Marines? The tale of the Minotaurs begins, as far as can be determined, with the 21st founding of Space Marine chapters in the 36th millennium, the infamous Cursed Founding. This was an era of hubris for the Adeptus Mechanicus, when the tech priests believed they could improve upon the Emperor's work by tampering with the sacred gene seed of the Adeptus Astartes. The results were catastrophic. Chapters created during this founding suffered from mutations, instability, and curses that would see many driven to extinction or declared excommunicate traitores. Among these ill-fated chapters was one bearing the name Minotaurs. The few fragmented records that remain describe their gene seed as chimeric, a term that sends chills through the Imperial scholar. To call gene seed chimeric suggests it was procured from a prohibited source, mixed with heretical genetic material, or tampered with in ways that violate the sacred precepts established by the Emperor himself. These early Minotaurs gained a fell reputation almost immediately. They were berserkers, warriors who made war with savage abandon and eschewed all contact with other Imperial forces. Their tendency to shun command from others, combined with their erratic gene seed tithes to the Adeptus Mechanicus, raised dark suspicions. What curse lurked in their blood? What secrets were they hiding? Descriptions from this era paint a disturbing picture, a force that would arrive in a war zone without preamble or reconnaissance, hurl themselves at the enemy without heed of loss or cost, then withdraw as suddenly as they'd arrived. Their fury was all-consuming, their methods unpredictable. They were, in short, too dangerous to be reliable allies. Then, from the middle of the 38th millennium onwards, the Minotaurs vanished. They did not die gloriously in battle, nor were they declared excommunicate traitores. They simply disappeared from the Imperial records. Their deeds were suppressed, their battle honors were expunged. A series of edicts and data purges, issued at the highest levels of Imperial authority, erased the Minotaurs from history. For over 2 millennia, the galaxy heard nothing of the Bronze Bulls. The chapter that had been born in the shadow of the cursed founding seemed to have met whatever dark fate awaited all children of that damned era. But the Minotaurs were not dead. They were merely waiting. When the Minotaurs reappeared approximately 1,000 standard years ago during the suppression of the Macarian heresy in the early 41st millennium, they were simultaneously familiar and profoundly changed. The chapter badge remained, a bull's head, though now in red with black horns instead of the original blue. The name remained, the reputation for brutality remained, but everything else was different. Gone were the barely controlled berserkers. In their place stood a chapter that fought as an integrated and highly flexible force. They were equipped to the highest Imperial standards, operating from a powerful chapter fleet of more than a dozen strike cruisers. They were no less brutal than the ancient tales suggested, but now they fought in a more considered and controlled manner. More tellingly, they responded quickly and without questions to calls from the High Lords of Terra, especially when the mission was to castigate, apprehend, or destroy formerly loyal Space Marines who had been declared renegade. It was as if the galaxy's most savage attack dog had been fitted with a leash, and that leash was held by the Senatorum Imperialis itself. But the question remained, are they the same chapter? This question has consumed Imperial scholars for centuries. Is the chapter bearing the name Minotaurs in the 41st millennium the same as the one created during the cursed 21st founding? Or are they a different body of warriors entirely, merely sharing a name and similar heraldry? The evidence supporting replacement is compelling. The change in tactics from undisciplined berserker charges to coordinated combined arms warfare is too dramatic to be explained by simple maturation. The shift in livery, organizational structure, and even equipment patterns suggest a fundamental transformation. Most damning is the complete suppression of all records relating to the Minotaurs' origins and current gene seed status, sealed by edicts that the Inquisition itself cannot easily breach. Some whisper that the original Minotaurs were destroyed or disappeared, and that a new chapter was founded in their place, perhaps created specifically to serve the High Lord's enforcers. Others suggest that the original chapter was so thoroughly rebuilt, their gene seeds so extensively modified and replaced, that they became something new while retaining their old name. The truth, as with so much regarding the Minotaurs, may never be known. All data relating to their origins and the current status of their gene seed tithes is sealed by the highest possible authority. What can be confirmed is that the gene seed tithes have been logged, but they remain classified at a level that even Inquisitor lords find difficult to access. If the Minotaurs' origins are mysterious, their loyalties are crystal clear. They serve the Emperor of Mankind and the High Lords of Terra with fanatical and unquestioning devotion. They are perhaps the only chapter in the Imperium that can be relied upon to answer calls from the Senatorum Imperialis without questions, without delay, and without mercy. This loyalty was demonstrated most dramatically during the Hexarchy Rebellion in the Era Indominus, when a cabal of current and former High Lords, many removed from office by the resurrected Primarch Reboot Guilliman, attempted a coup on Terra. They called upon the Minotaurs. The chapter arrived on the throne world believing the heart of the Imperium was under siege from enemies within, ready to prosecute another bloody purge in the Emperor's name. That the coup failed, betrayed from within by the Grand Master of Assassins, does not change the fundamental reality. The Minotaurs will come when the High Lords call. They will do what other chapters will not. They will kill whomever they are pointed at, including their fellow Space Marines, without hesitation or remorse. This unwavering loyalty to Terra makes them invaluable to the Senatorum Imperialis. It also makes them deeply feared by other chapters who see in the bronze-clad Astartes a weapon that could one day be turned against them. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Minotaurs is their arsenal. Simply put, they possess equipment and resources that would make first founding chapters jealous. The chapter maintains large, replenishable stockpiles of heavy armor, allowing their battle companies to make extensive use of Vindicators and Predators as tactical support vehicles. They field widespread quantities of Mark 8 errant power armor, advanced patterns that remain rare in most chapters. They commonly deploy much of their first company as Terminators, with widespread access to rare patterns like Tartaros and Arconac tactical dreadnought armor. Perhaps most remarkably, they field relic vehicles seldom found outside the hands of honored first founding chapters. Extensive squadrons of Storm Eagle gunships, ancient Spartan assault tanks, and most impressive of all, at least 10 Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts observed during the Orphean War alone. The Contemptor pattern dreadnought was once commonplace during the Great Crusade in the 30th millennium, featuring adamantic reactors and energy shield systems whose arts of construction have supposedly long since passed beyond use. For a chapter to field even one is remarkable. For the Minotaurs to field 10 or more in a single campaign suggests access to resources and technologies that should not exist in the current era. Where does this equipment come from? The most obvious answer is also the most disturbing. The High Lords of Terra themselves, perhaps drawing upon the vast reserves of Mars or the secret stockpiles maintained by the Adeptus Mechanicus. If true, it would confirm the Minotaurs as a tool of the Senatorum Imperialis, equipped and maintained to serve as their personal enforcers. The Minotaurs' tactical doctrine is as straightforward as it is brutal. They prefer to operate as a whole chapter or in as few divisions as possible, concentrating and thereby maximizing their destructive power. Unlike most chapters that spread their forces across multiple war zones, the Minotaurs almost exclusively operate as a complete chapter. This makes them a blunt instrument, but one capable of ripping through almost any enemy. When the Minotaurs arrive in a theater of war, they do not arrive piecemeal, they arrive in overwhelming force. Their preferred method is to deploy a vanguard to pin enemies in combat, use fast units to encircle them, then bring in the full weight of the chapter's firepower and heavy armor to crush the foe without mercy. The chapter excels at siegecraft and combat against monstrous opponents, which they can overwhelm by sheer weight of numbers if necessary. They're willing to sustain heavy losses to ensure victory, employing tactics that many chapters would consider wasteful. Their commanders seem less mindful of the fate of individual battle brothers than most, so long as the objective is achieved. This willingness to accept casualties would be crippling for most chapters. The Minotaurs, however, possess a markedly rapid influx of new neophytes to replace ongoing losses. The speed of transition between neophyte, scout marine, and full battle brother is brief compared to most chapters, explained by extremely high levels of programmed psycho-indoctrination and neurocerebral surgery. These techniques, while not forbidden as heretical, carry inherent dangers that could damage subjects physically and mentally. Most chapters consider the studied training and battlefield year edition of neophytes to be key in tempering the soul of a warrior. The Minotaurs, by contrast, used artificial techniques to rapidly replace their self-inflicted losses, creating warriors who are perhaps less individually refined, but available in numbers that allow the chapter to prosecute wars of brutal attrition. Among the Minotaurs' arsenal, none are more feared or more mysterious than their Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts. All of these ancient war machines are addressed by their brethren as Hecaton, a word of Terran origin thought to mean giant, legion, or most tellingly, a monster enslaved. This terminology is significant. In most chapters, dreadnoughts are revered as living legends, honored ancients who sacrificed their mortal forms to continue serving the Emperor. Battle brothers speak to them with deep respect, seeking their wisdom and counsel. The Minotaurs treat their dreadnoughts with cold indifference. Outsiders who have witnessed this behavior find it deeply disturbing. The Hecaton are treated as weapons, as tools, as enslaved monsters rather than honored heroes. They are deployed without ceremony, fought without support that other chapters would provide, and addressed without reverence. One incident epitomizes this treatment. During the Bifrost Uprising, the Contemptor known as Hecaton Icos became the terror of Bifrost when, battle-damaged and gore-drenched, he was mistakenly fired upon by Bifrost Huskarl infantry. Provoked, Icaros rampaged through the Imperial lines, killing 37 Huskarls and their Space Marine commander before finally obeying a Vox order from orbit to stand down. Massacre was not punished. Icos was not chastised. The incident was simply noted and the chapter moved on as if the death of dozens of Imperial soldiers at the hands of their own ally was merely an unfortunate mishap. Why do Minotaurs treat their dreadnoughts this way? Are the warriors within them volunteers or something else? Are they even the same individuals from battle to battle? Or are the Hecatons simply shells into which damaged warriors are placed and disposed of when they fail? The truth, like so much about the Minotaurs, remains sealed behind walls of secrecy. When the Minotaurs emerged from their millennia-long absence during the Macarian heresy, circa 400 to 425 M41, they announced their return with characteristic brutality. They formed the spearhead of battle groups that shattered petty star empires, their land raiders blasting apart elite armored regiments on the ice plains of Gyros Prime. They carried out exterminatus orders on entire worlds. They hunted down and obliterated the Xenos-possessed remnants of the Imperial Paladins chapter, poisoning the seas of the Agri-world in the process. But it was the Euxine Incident that truly announced the Minotaurs' new role in the Imperium. The Doom Warriors and Inceptors chapters had become locked in conflict, their battle escalating even as the Imperium desperately needed forces to pacify the worlds conquered during the Macarian Crusade. Both chapters refused calls to end their strife and aid in the pacification efforts. The Minotaurs were dispatched to resolve the situation. They did not arrive as mediators or peacekeepers. They arrived as executioners. Caring nothing for their causes, rights, or honor of either chapter, the Minotaurs attacked in full force. The Doom Warriors, overmatched and broken, fled the system in a barely organized retreat. The Inceptors, fighting desperately against warriors who showed them no mercy and gave them no quarter, were forced into humiliating surrender. Fewer than 100 battle brothers survived the Minotaurs' assault. The Euxine Incident created enmity between the Minotaurs and the Ultramarines and their successor chapters that persists to this day. The Sons of Guilliman have sworn vengeance should the opportunity arise and have banned the Minotaurs from entering the realm of Ultramar. It was a price the Bronze Bulls were willing to pay. After all, they had demonstrated their purpose. They were not brothers in arms to other chapters. They were the High Lord's weapon against the Adeptus Astartes themselves. The Badab War, 907 to 913 M41, saw the Minotaurs arrive in the Maelstrom Zone, answering the direct call from the acting Legate Inquisitor. The conflict was in its fourth year of open warfare between Loyalist and Secessionist chapters, and the Minotaurs committed their entire strength, 10 companies and 11 capital ships. Throughout the conflict, the Minotaurs operated largely independently, striking targets as they saw fit. Their reputation for leaving no survivors among those who resisted them grew quickly. They gained several important victories, effectively destroying secessionist forces on multiple worlds. But the action that would spread their fame far beyond the conflict was their wholesale defeat of the Lamenters chapter in close-quarters space battle in the Terra system in 908 M41. In the brutal void combat that followed, the Minotaurs demonstrated the ruthless efficiency that had become their hallmark. When they finally withdrew from the Maelstrom Zone in 913 M41 after the fall of Badab Primaris, took with them several former Lamenters warships to replace their own losses, the spoils of victory over fellow Space Marines. Notable in this campaign was the complete absence of Chapter Master Asterion Moloc from any Loyalist war councils. While other Chapter Masters coordinated strategy and operations, Moloc remained aloof, sending his Reclusiarch Ivanis Incomi as his representative. The only records of Moloc's presence came from picked footage recovered from the battle scans and fearful stories spread by the few secessionist survivors of the Minotaurs' attacks. In 989 M41, the Night Reapers chapter was declared excommunicate traitoris after forensic evidence proved they had destroyed the rogue trader fleet of Baron Strauss Ewan. What followed was a 3-year campaign that demonstrated the Minotaurs' role as the Imperium's premier hunters of renegade Astartes. When the initial Imperial response, a 4-company force from the Avenging Suns chapter, was ambushed and humiliated by the Night Reapers, the High Lords took direct action. They deployed 2 full chapters, the Red Templars as the Hounds, experts in search and destroy operations, and the Minotaurs as the Hunters ready to deal the death blow. The Night Reapers fought with savage resistance across a dozen star systems, having augmented themselves with forbidden Xenos weapons technology and dark pacts. They were driven before the Imperial forces, bloodying their pursuers at every turn, until finally they were cornered at the Perrin Cross, a massive derelict space wreck where they sought an ancient weapon to turn the tide. At the height of the Minotaurs' assault, the Grey Knights arrived and ordered all Imperial forces except the Minotaurs to pull back. What transpired in the depths of the Perrin Cross remained shrouded in mystery, but the result was clear. The ancient wreck broke apart in gigaton-level explosions, consuming the Night Reapers, an entire force of Grey Knights including their brother captain, and a substantial but undefined number of Minotaurs. Asterion Moloc survived. The Grey Knights and the Ordo Malleus have remained curiously silent about their losses. Whatever profane secrets surrounded the Night Reapers are believed buried in the burning fragments of their funeral pyre. The Orphean War, 992 to 995 M41, saw the Minotaurs facing an enemy they could not simply bludgeon into submission, the Necrons of the Minarch dynasty. This campaign would test the chapter as never before and reveal both their strengths and their limitations. Asterion Moloc served as commander-in-chief of the Space Marine forces deployed against the Minarch dynasty. The Minotaurs chapter fleet had expanded to 3 battle barges and 8 strike cruisers, though 2 of the battle barges would be lost during the conflict. They deployed their full arsenal, including at least 10 Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts. The climax came during the Void battle at Amara Prime. The Minotaur strike cruiser Stymphalos and battle barge Fidelitas Lambda fought desperately against the Scythe-class harvest ships and the massive Necron flagship Dead Hand, a Cairn-class tomb ship. In a desperate assault, the Minotaurs launched boarding actions against the Dead Hand. Terminator squads and Contemptor Dreadnoughts were fired by boarding torpedo into the Xenos vessel's flanks. Fighting through corridors filled with deathless legions, they reached the control vault where Asterion Moloc himself confronted the Necron overlord, believed to be Kutlak, the war leader of the Minarch dynasty. The duel between the chapter master and the ancient Xenos lord must have been titanic. Moloc struck down and severely damaged the overlord, But before the killing blow could be delivered, both were cast into the void when the Death Hand began its retreat. The battle barge Fidelitas Lambda, in an act of supreme sacrifice, rammed the fleeing tomb ship, causing massive damage that forced the Necron fleet to withdraw. Moloc was initially reported lost. It would not be the last time. Over the last 5 centuries, there have been at least 6 incidents where the chapter master of the Minotaurs was thought killed, only to later reappear. This pattern has led to disturbing speculation about the nature of the man, or men bearing that title. When the Imperium proved unable to maintain control over the Orpheus sector, the Minotaurs were charged by the High Lords with carrying out exterminatus actions on those worlds irretrievably lost to the Necrons. Once again, they served as the Emperor's executioners, destroying what could not be saved. The defense of Hermetica, 760 M41, exemplifies both the Minotaurs' effectiveness and the terrible costs of their methods. When the Wordbearer's Dark Apostle Layak the Devourer led a vast mutant horde in assaulting the vital Hive world, the Minotaurs were the first outside force to respond. Using their chapter fleet's firepower for cover, they cut off the invaders from orbit and counter-assaulted the main Chaos foothold at Hive Casaubon. Their assault was devastating and indiscriminate. After heavy bombardment, they smashed through the Cathedral District and attacked columns of heavy armor, heedless of the cost in civilian lives. Thousands of trapped civilians were caught between the Minotaurs' advance and the retreating Chaos forces, with nowhere to run. The Minotaurs pressed forward regardless, blasting apart any strong point they encountered. The kilometer-high main spire of the Basilica was toppled in crossfire from Thunderhawk gunships. Into this storm of debris and ash, Terminators and assault squads attacked to wipe out survivors. Asterion Moloc led from the front, fighting his way into the depths of the Basilica vaults where he slaughtered Layak's demon-possessed bodyguard and struck a mortal blow to the Dark Apostle himself. Though Layak escaped through dark sorcery before the fatal stroke could be delivered, the leaderless mutant tide was beaten back and contained. Victory was achieved. The world was saved. But at what cost? The number of civilians killed in the Minotaurs' liberation was never officially recorded. To the Bronze Bulls, they were merely acceptable losses in service to the Emperor's will. Asterion Moloc, Master of the Minotaurs, Satrap of the Daedalus Crata, Bringer of Wrath. His titles alone speak to the dark legend he has become. This paranoid and bloody-handed commander revels in his fell reputation. His name is a byword for death and mayhem carried out in the Emperor's name. As a warrior, Moloc is without peer. He has personally slain several renegade chapter masters, alongside ranks of Orc war bosses, Xenos Corsair princes, and Chaos champions. A veteran of hundreds of battles, his body has been heavily rebuilt with cybernetic augments. His sheer spite and malice allow him to shrug off wounds that would fell lesser space marines. He wields the Black Spear, a relic weapon of unknown provenance similar to the sacred arms of the Adeptus Custodes. This power weapon can pierce even Terminator battleplate and incorporates a single-shot laser weapon potent enough to be used against armored vehicles. It serves as both his personal weapon and the ceremonial badge of office for every master of the Minotaurs. In battle, Moloc is often found at the head of the chapter's Terminators, slamming into enemy lines with overwhelming force. He takes pleasure in the utter destruction of his foes and is willing to spend his warriors' lives freely to achieve his objectives. Yet Moloc is more than just a brutal killer. He's also a diligent and disciplined logistician and strategist, a master of siegecraft who understands war not just as a series of battles, but as complex calculus of resources, objectives, and acceptable losses. Outside of battle, he can be found on his brazen throne at the center of the maze-like chambers of the heavy assault carrier Daedalus Crata. Here he sits surrounded by data feeds, tabulation servitors, and casualty reports, measuring the drops of blood spilled in pursuit of his chapter's strategic goals. Every loss is noted, every gain is calculated, every campaign is analyzed with cold precision. This combination of savage fury in battle and methodical calculation and planning makes Moloc a uniquely dangerous opponent. He's not a mindless berserker, he's a thinking monster, one who can unleash controlled devastation with surgical precision. Yet he has little patience for councils or strategic planning when forced to work with other Imperial forces. He chooses to remain aloof, as is his chapter's nature, often sending Reclusiarch Ivanis Incomi as his representative. During the entire Badab War, there is no record of Moloc ever attending a war council with the other loyalist chapter masters. He issued his orders and fought his battles, and others could either stay out of his way or be crushed beneath his advance. Of the true character and history of Asterion Moloc the Man, little is known even at the highest levels of the Inquisition and Minotaurs. What can be said is shrouded in mystery, rumor, and contradiction, but one detail stands out above all others. Moloc has reportedly been killed at least 6 times over the last 5 centuries, only to later reappear and resume command. This, coupled with the very high level of cybernetic rebuilding the chapter master has undergone, has led to extreme speculation. Some observers suggest that Asterion Moloc is not one space marine, but many down the centuries, each inheriting not only the name and panoply, but also, blasphemously, an enigmatically enforced personality and recorded memories taken from different lifetimes. The theory is that when one Moloc falls, another is created. His memories are extracted and implanted. His personality is reconstructed through forbidden psychosurgery. The Black Spear is passed to a new bearer, and Asterion Moloc returns to command the Minotaurs as if death were merely an inconvenient interruption. If true, it would explain much. His seemingly superhuman resilience, his multiple deaths and returns, the century-spanning consistency of his tactics and personality. It would also represent the use of technology so forbidden that even the Inquisition would balk at the implications. Others dismiss this as slander designed to smear a chapter whose actions have already garnered it many enemies. They point out that Space Marines are extraordinarily resilient, that cybernetic rebuilding is common, and that multiple near-death experiences are hardly unprecedented for a warrior of Moloc's age and experience. The truth, as always with the Minotaurs, remains locked behind walls of secrecy. What can be said with certainty is that Asterion Moloc, whatever he truly is, personifies his chapter. He's brutal, efficient, mysterious, and terrifying. He serves the Emperor and the High Lords with absolute loyalty, and he will continue to prosecute the bloodiest campaigns of the Imperium till either he falls for the final time or the galaxy itself burns. The birth of the Great Rift brought catastrophe even to the Emperor's most feared enforcers. The Minotaurs' mobile fortress monastery came under assault by the 7th Plague Company of the Death Guard Traitor Legion. Though the Bronze Bulls pushed back Mortarion sons, celebration turned to desperation when they discovered the true cost of their victory. The Death Guard's assault had been a calculated attack. While the Minotaurs fought to repel boarders, the servants of the Plague God infiltrated deeper into the fortress monastery, corrupting the chapter's gene seed stocks with Nurgle's rot. By the time the contamination was discovered, it was too late. The chapter's genetic future had been tainted beyond redemption. For any other chapter, this would be a death sentence. The Minotaurs, however, possessed resources others did not. They began a desperate crusade across the stars to reach Terra itself, to access the Adeptus Mechanicus purified gene seed reserves before the chapter wasted away. It was a race against time, against decay, against extinction. The fact that the Minotaurs had the connections and authority to even attempt such a thing speaks volumes about their relationship with Terra. What other chapter could demand access to the Mechanicus' most sacred vaults? What other chapter could expect the High Lords to provide them with replacement gene seed from the reserves meant for the creation of new chapters? The outcome of this crusade remains unclear in available records, but the fact that the Minotaurs continue to prosecute campaigns in the Era Indominus suggests they succeeded, or that the High Lords deemed them too valuable to lose. The Hexarchy Rebellion revealed both the Minotaurs' absolute loyalty to the High Lords and the dangerous nature of that loyalty in the new order created by Reboot Guilliman's return. When the resurrected Primarch began reforming the Imperium, not all welcomed his changes. A cabal of current and deposed High Lords, many removed from office by Guilliman himself, refused to accept the new order. Led by Irthu Hematalion, former master of the Administratum, and the deposed Ecclesiarch Baldo Slist, the Hexarchy also included several still-seated High Lords: Grand Provost Marshal Avalisa Drakmar, Lord Commander Militant Mar Av Asherial, Lord High Admiral Merelda Perith, and Grand Master of Assassins Fadix. Using their vast resources, they plotted to seize control of Terra while Guilliman was away commanding the Indominus Crusade. They called upon the Minotaurs, and the Minotaurs came. The Bronze Bulls arrived on the throne world believing the heart of the Imperium was under siege from enemies within. They came prepared to do what they had always done, crush the Emperor's foes without question, without mercy, without hesitation. They did not ask who was right or wrong. The High Lords had called, and that was enough. The coup failed, but not because of the Minotaurs. Fadix's loyalty to the Hexarchy had always been a ruse, arranged from the start by Guilliman to ensure the loyalty of the High Lords he left behind on Terra. Once the Grand Master of Assassins gave the signal, each Hexarchy member was killed by his well-placed operatives. The Minotaurs found themselves on Terra, weapons drawn, with no enemies to fight. This incident laid bare the fundamental problem with the Minotaurs' absolute loyalty to the High Lords. In an Imperium where those lords might themselves become traitors or misguided reactionaries, the Minotaurs' unquestioning obedience made them a weapon that could be pointed in any direction, even against the Primarch's reforms. What happened to the Minotaurs after the coup's failure? Were they censured, punished, or simply redirected towards new enemies? The records remain frustratingly silent, but the chapter continues to operate in the era Indominus, suggesting that even a Primarch recognizes the value and danger of having such a weapon in the Imperium's arsenal. Despite their involvement in the Hexarchy's plot, the Minotaurs also served in the Indominus Crusade itself. A complement including Strike Force Abrecht under Captain Ulrich served with Battle Group Faustus of Fleet Secundus, helping to retake the Bosphori system from heretical forces including the Thousand Sons. The Minotaurs proved their worth, being specifically responsible for recapturing the void docks and orbit of Bosphori Dio from Magnus's sons. It was a reminder that whatever their political complications, the Minotaurs remained supremely effective warriors when properly deployed. This duality, serving both the Crusade and the attempted coup, encapsulates the Minotaurs perfectly. They are simultaneously loyal servants of the Imperium and potential threats to its stability. They are both necessary and dangerous, valued and feared, heroes and executioners. The Minotaurs seem to bear little respect for anyone or anything save the Emperor of Mankind and the High Lords of Terra. They are disdainful of all other subjects of the Imperium, radiating a malign intensity that makes even the boldest Imperial general fearful of approaching them. This contempt extends even to their fellow Space Marines. They show open disdain when forced to serve alongside brother chapters, leading to recriminations up to and including duels and low-level hostilities. In one well-recorded incident, they nearly came to blows with the Genesis chapter after deliberately insulting the name of Marneus Calgar. Bloody conflict was only averted by the arrival of a fresh wave of orcs. Some Imperial commanders who have worked with the Minotaurs describe them as being at the edge of madness or heresy. They note the chapter's obsessive security precautions even when dealing with supposed allies, defenses and protocols that border on the paranoid. The Minotaurs trust no one, work with no one willingly, and treat all others as potential threats. Individual Minotaurs are described as brooding and malign warriors, far from the epitome of honor and righteousness that Space Marines are supposed to represent. They hold about them an aura of barely restrained spite and malice that breeds fear and apprehension in all but the strongest hearts. Despite, or perhaps because of, their contempt for others, the Minotaurs seem to take pleasure in testing themselves against worthy foes, and to them, no foes are more worthy than other Space Marines. It appears that many of the Minotaurs' operations are against other Astartes forces, often renegades or isolated elements within otherwise loyal chapters that refuse to suppress their own. The Minotaurs undertake such missions with relish, perhaps viewing them as opportunities to prove their superiority. When they fought the Doom Warriors and Inceptors at Euxine, when they shattered the Lamenters at Optera, when they hunted the Night Reapers through the Lana Rifts. In each case, they were fighting opponents who could match them in skill, equipment, and genetic enhancement. This predilection for hunting their fellow Astartes makes the Minotaurs uniquely suited to the role as the High Lord's enforcers. They don't just tolerate fighting other chapters, they seem to actively enjoy it. Where other Space Marines would hesitate to raise their weapons against Brother Astartes, the Minotaurs charge forward without a moment's doubt. The power armor worn by Minotaur's battle brothers bears syncretic iconography denoting rank and battlefield record. Many of these symbols have meanings hidden from outsiders, though it is believed that the numeration and coloration of the lambda helican glyph markings common to the Minotaur heraldry refers to attested kills against worthy opponents in single combat, likely in increasing order of magnitude. In other words, the Minotaurs keep score. Each worthy enemy slain is noted, marked, and displayed on their armor. One can imagine these markings concentrating heavily on kills against other Space Marines, each lambda glyph representing not just a victory, but proof of superiority over supposed equal warriors. The contemporary chapter color scheme has also changed from the original yellow with red decorations to bronze power armor with a red bull's head bearing black horns as their badge. Members of the veteran First Company wear a variant badge, a bronze bull's head on a dark red background, marking them as the elite killers of an already elite chapter. There are those within the Ordo Hereticus who believe the Minotaurs possess unknown ties to the High Lords of Terra. The evidence supporting this theory is extensive. First, there's the equipment. The Minotaurs possess resources that should not exist outside the most honored first founding chapters. Contemptor Dreadnoughts, whose construction techniques were supposedly lost millennia ago. Vast stockpiles of Terminator armor in multiple rare patterns. Advanced Mark 8 power armor in quantities most chapters can only dream of. Ancient relics, vehicles like Spartan assault tanks. Where does this all come from? Second is their deployment pattern. The Minotaurs are seemingly deployed according to the pronouncements of the Senatorium Imperialis, and rarely if ever answer calls to war from any other Imperial authority. When the High Lords call, the entire chapter responds immediately. When planetary governors or sector commanders call, the Minotaurs do not come. Third, there is the suppression of records. All data relating to the Minotaur's origins and current gene seed status is sealed by edicts that even inquisitorial authority cannot easily circumvent. Who has the power to hide information from the Inquisition itself? Only the High Lords of Terra. Fourth is their role. Many of the operations in which the Minotaurs have been committed are against other Space Marine forces. They are deployed to destroy renegade chapters, to punish wayward Astartes, to enforce the will of Terra against warriors who should be beyond any mortal authority. They are, in effect, the High Lord's weapon against the Adeptus Astartes itself. Taking all evidence together, a disturbing picture emerges. The Minotaurs may not be a normal Space Marine chapter at all. They may be the Praetorians of Terra, a chapter created and maintained specifically to serve the High Lords, equipped from Mars' secret stockpiles and deployed to handle situations too sensitive or too dangerous for normal Imperial legions. This would explain their disappearance from records during the 38th millennium. Perhaps the original cursed founding Minotaurs were destroyed or deemed unusable. Perhaps a new chapter was created to replace them, one whose loyalty was absolute, whose methods were brutal, and whose very existence served the High Lord's need for a reliable instrument of internal enforcement. It would explain their superior equipment. If Mars had been supplying them on orders from the High Lords, they would have access to archaeotech and rare patterns unavailable to other chapters. The Fabricator General himself has worked with the Minotaurs, as seen during the 8th Black Crusade when he provided forces to fight alongside them and the Adeptus Custodes. It would explain their rapid replenishment of losses. If they have priority access to gene seed reserves on Terra itself, they could sustain losses that would cripple other chapters. Their willingness to fight wars of attrition makes sense if they know replacement gene seed is always available. It would explain their deployment pattern. They answer only to the High Lords because they are the High Lord's personal chapter, created for missions that cannot be entrusted to chapters with independent loyalties and complicated political relationships. Most tellingly, it would explain their role hunting other Space Marines. The High Lords need a force capable of destroying rogue chapters without hesitation, without political complications, without the risk that old alliances or shared Primarchs will cause them to falter. The Minotaurs have no such concerns. They have no Primarch, no homeworld, no ties to other chapters. They have only Terra, and Terra commands them absolutely. Not everyone accepts this theory. Critics point out that much of it is speculation built on fragmentary evidence. Yes, the Minotaurs are well equipped, but perhaps they simply have an excellent relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus. Yes, they respond to the High Lords, but so do many chapters when Terra calls. Yes, they fight other Space Marines, but so do the Space Wolves, the Dark Angels, and others when circumstance requires it. The suppression of records could simply reflect the shame of the cursed founding and the desire to hide whatever mutations or defects the original Minotaurs possessed. The rapid replacement of losses might be explained by the chapter's willingness to use dangerous but effective indoctrination techniques. Their contempt for others might just be a natural result of their being constantly deployed on thankless, bloody missions. Moreover, if the Minotaurs truly were the High Lord's personal enforcers, would they have participated in the Hexarchy's coup attempt? That incident suggests the chapter's loyalty is to the institution of the High Lords rather than to specific individuals. They will serve whoever holds those offices, even if those individuals are attempting treason. Perhaps the truth is simpler. The Minotaurs are simply a chapter that has carved out a specific niche within the Imperium. They handle the dirty work that other chapters won't touch. They respond to Terra because Terra provides them with the resources they need. They fight other Space Marines because that's the mission they've accepted. They are not a conspiracy, just an exceptionally brutal tool in the Imperium's vast arsenal. Which brings us back to that chilling line from Imperial records. More than one Imperial agent has been found dead whilst researching such subjects. What does this mean? Are these deaths accidents? Suicides by investigators who uncovered terrible truths? Or are they murders, eliminations carried out to protect the secrets too dangerous to reveal? If the Minotaurs are what some suspect, the High Lord's personal executioners equipped from forbidden stockpiles created through heretical methods deployed to destroy wayward chapters, then their very existence would be a secret worth killing to protect. The death of a few investigators would be a small price to pay to keep the Imperium's internal security apparatus hidden. But if the deaths were merely coincidental, merely the result of digging into records so thoroughly suppressed that accessing them triggers fatal security measures or attracts the attention of other dangerous parties, then the Minotaurs might be nothing more than what they appear, a brutal chapter with unclear origins and uncomfortable methods. The truth, as with everything about the Minotaurs, remains locked away, and anyone who gets too close to unlocking it ends up dead. The Minotaurs cast a long shadow across the Adeptus Astartes. Every chapter knows that if it steps too far out of line, if they refuse the wrong order, if they make the wrong enemy on Terra, the Bronze Bulls might come for them. And when the Minotaurs come, they do not come as brothers seeking to correct a wayward sibling. They come as executioners. This knowledge affects chapter politics in ways both subtle and profound. Chapter masters must consider not just their obligations to their Primarch's legacy or their chapter's honor, but also how their actions will be perceived on Terra. Will this decision anger the High Lords? Will this autonomy be seen as dangerous independence? Will the next fleet to arrive in our system bear bronze-clad warriors come to destroy us? The Ultramarines and their many successor chapters remember Euxine and have sworn to never fight alongside the Minotaurs again. The Lamenters bear the scars of Terra and mourn brothers lost to their own kind. The few survivors of the Inceptors carry the shame of their humiliating surrender. They are not just military defeats, they are warnings to all chapters about what happens when Terra decides you've gone too far. The existence of the Minotaurs, whether they are what conspiracy theorists believe or simply an unusually brutal chapter, represents a fundamental problem with the Imperium's internal security structure. The Imperium needs some mechanism to deal with rogue Space Marines, chapters that have gone traitor or simply refuse to follow orders. The Space Marines are too powerful, too autonomous, too independent to be controlled through normal Imperial authority. But the solution, having one chapter specifically tasked with destroying others, creates its own problems. It breeds resentment and fear among the very warriors the Imperium depends upon for its survival. It creates a culture where chapters might hesitate to take necessary but controversial actions out of fear of reprisal. It introduces an element of terror into an institution that should be bound together by brotherhood and shared purpose. Moreover, it raises the question, who watches the Watchers? If the Minotaurs are the High Lord's weapon against rogue chapters, what happens if the Minotaurs themselves go rogue? What happens if the High Lords abuse the power, using the Bronze Bulls to eliminate chapters for political rather than legitimate reasons? The Hexarchy Rebellion proved that this isn't just theoretical. The Minotaurs were nearly used in an attempted coup against the Imperial's rightful government. The Minotaurs are both necessary and dangerous. They're the Imperium's solution to a problem it cannot afford to leave unsolved, and they're a weapon that could easily turn against the very authority that wields it. Notable descendants and associates. Beyond Asterion Moloc, several other Minotaurs have distinguished themselves in the chapter's bloody history. Reclusiarch Ivanis Encomi serves as the voice of the chapter, representing the otherwise aloof Moloc in war councils and tactical planning with other Imperial forces. Forged in the crucible of the Badab War, Encomi wields the Crozius Arcanos, built from the remains of a similar relic taken from the defeated Night Reapers chapter. He's as skilled at political maneuvering as he is at inspiring warriors to greater heights of hatred and destruction. Vigilator Sergeant Hamath Kratos represents the chapter's rapid promotion system at its best. His phenomenal proficiency with all ballistic weapons and his ruthless, calculating leadership style earned him early command and access to the chapter's advanced war gear. During the Orphean War, he used human workers and servitors as bait to trap Drakari raiders, sacrificing 6 and 10 civilians to achieve his objective, a trade he considered more than acceptable. Captain Thule progressed from Sternguard Veteran Sergeant at the Badab War to Vanguard Veteran Sergeant during the Orphean War, eventually achieving the rank of Captain. His 67 confirmed kills at the Judgment of Vienna demonstrated the precision and savage aggression that defined the Minotaur's approach to warfare. Among the Hecaton, Ancient Geryon stands out, a veteran of the Lampetin assault during the Badab War who was entombed in a Contemptor chassis after being mortally wounded. During the Battle of Amara Prime, he engaged the Necron Overlord in single combat and was forced to his knees before being saved by Moloc himself. Whether he survived being swept into the void along with his chapter master remains unknown. The unanswered questions. After examining all available evidence about the Minotaurs, we're left with more questions than answers. Are they the same chapter created during the cursed 21st founding or a replacement that inherited the name? Did they master their curse, or did a new chapter simply take the bronze and red? What is the true nature of their gene seed, and why is it so heavily classified? Where does this incredible arsenal come from? How do they replace losses so quickly? What is the truth about Asterion Moloc? Is he one man rebuilt many times, or many men inheriting a title and personality? Why do they treat their dreadnoughts with such cold indifference? What ties do they have to the High Lords of Terra? Are they truly the Senatorium Imperialis' personal enforcers? And who is killing the investigators who dig too deeply into these questions? These questions may never be answered. The edicts sealing the Minotaur's secrets are among the most powerful in the Imperium, and the bodies of those who tried to break those seals serve as warnings to others. What we can't say for certain is that the Minotaurs exist. They serve Terra with absolute loyalty, but they will continue to prosecute the bloodiest campaigns of the Imperial with brutal efficiency. They are the Bronze Executioners, the Emperor's attack dogs, the High Lord's enforcers. They are feared by the enemies and mistrusted by their allies. They are necessary and dangerous, brutal and effective, mysterious and terrifying. They are the Minotaurs, and they will endure as long as the Imperium needs warriors willing to do what others will not. The Minotaurs represent everything that is both necessary and troubling about the Imperium of Man. They are the solution to problems that have no good solutions. They are the weapon aimed at enemies that cannot be defeated by conventional means. They are enforcement arm of government that rules over millions of worlds and must sometimes crush its own defenders to maintain order. In a more perfect Imperium, the Minotaurs would not need to exist. Chapters would police themselves. The bonds of brotherhood would prevent Astartes from turning against each other. The High Lords would not need a personal army to enforce their will. But the Imperium is not perfect. It's a crumbling empire held together by force, faith, and fear. In such an empire, the Minotaurs are not an aberration. They are inevitable. They're monsters, yes, but they're monsters fighting for humanity in a galaxy full of greater monsters. They are brutal, but the universe they fight in rewards brutality. They are feared, but fear is one of the few currencies that still have value in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Perhaps the most disturbing thing about the Minotaurs is not what they are, but what they represent. The Imperium's willingness to sacrifice honor, brotherhood, and decency in service of survival. The Bronze Bulls are what happens when an empire decides that the ends justify any means, when victory becomes more important than virtue, when staying alive matters more than staying human. And yet, in their own terrible way, the Minotaurs serve the Emperor. They fight his wars. They defend his Imperium. They kill his enemies without hesitation or mercy. They are loyal, absolutely and unquestioningly, to Terra. In an age of traitors and heretics, of renegades and fallen heroes, the Minotaurs remain true to their purpose. So the Bronze Bulls continue their eternal watch. They deploy from their fortress monastery aboard the Daedalus Crata, answering calls from Terra that other chapters never hear. They bring their Contemptors and their Terminators, their Land Raiders and their Storm Eagles. They smash through enemy lines with overwhelming force, accepting casualties that would break other chapters, replacing their losses through methods that make even the Mechanicus uncomfortable. And when the battle is done, when the blood has been spilled and the enemies have been crushed, the Minotaurs withdraw. They do not seek glory or recognition. They do not build monuments or write sagas. They simply move on to the next war zone, the next rebellion, the next renegade chapter that needs to be destroyed. They are the Emperor's attack dogs, and they do not rest. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And in that eternal war, the Imperium needs weapons. The Minotaurs are one of the sharpest, most brutal weapons in the Imperium's arsenal. They may not be heroes in any conventional sense. They may not inspire songs or legends of noble valor, but they get the job done. They are the Bronze Executioners. They are the High Lord's Enforcers. They are the monsters that humanity needs to survive in a monstrous galaxy. And more than one Imperial agent has been found dead while researching exactly what they are. Perhaps it's better that way. Some truths are too dangerous to know. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. And some monsters should remain mysterious, known only by the terror they inspire and the enemies they destroy. The Minotaurs will endure because the Imperium needs them. And that, more than anything, tells us everything we need to know about the state of humanity in the 41st millennium.